with one cat, 2 teenagers, and a man who wants to live in a boat. She's an award-winning short story writer and author of the PSS Chronicles, a young adult paranormal thriller series. The first book of the series, Ghost Hand, is currently a semi-finalist for the Kindle Book Review 2013 Best Indie Book Awards. Congratulations. Ripley doesn't smoke or drink or cuss as much as her characters. Her only real vices are writing, eating M&Ms, and watching reality television. Ripley, come on up.
Hello, it's really good to be here. This is my first time, but what a wonderful event. So, the book I'm going to be reading from tonight, this is the first book of the PSS Chronicles series, Ghost Hand. And I'm really excited to tell you tonight that the second book of the series, Ghost Hold, which I can show you the cover right here, I'll give a little postcard. Didn't bring anything bigger, sorry, but comes out on Monday. So I'm very, very excited. Yes, I could write 2 books, not just one. So I'm pretty excited about that. I write young adult paranormal thrillers, so think Twilight, but more exciting. And with a female lead who has a little more kick-assness, I guess, or a little bit less wishy-washy. And more thriller than romance. There is a little bit of romance, but it's more excitement, page-turner. A lot of times people tell me they started the book Saturday night and finished it Sunday morning. Yeah, so they're hard to put down, I guess. That's what I'm told. I have trouble putting them down, so. What are they about? They are about Olivia Black, who is a 17-year-old girl born in a tiny town in southern Illinois. But she's born with a very rare birth defect called psyche-sansoma, which means life without flesh. She's born with a ghost hand. So if you can see on the cover, instead of a flesh hand, she has an ethereal hand, so made of this special energy. And that's really the only thing that's different in the world in the series, is that fact, that there are children being born with this, and around the time the story happens, they're all teenagers. So you have all these PSS teenagers running around. A lot of times people ask me what inspired the idea for the series, and the idea really came, I have a friend who was in a bad accident, and he had his leg amputated. And I was at his house one summer, and he was out walking in the grass, and he said, you know, I can feel the grass between my toes, the toes that I don't have anymore. Sometimes I have a pain in my leg, in the leg I don't have anymore. And I'm sure that many of you are familiar with the idea of phantom limbs, that people who have lost limbs still can feel them as though they have, not even just people who've lost limbs, but people who are born without an existing limb still have sensation. Their brain translates nerve messages or whatever, and they still feel like they have that. So I kind of took that idea and ran with it and thought, what if those limbs really existed? What if they were made out of some sort of energy and they could do things? What would they do, and what kind of power would they hold? And so I created this world where children begin to be born with these kind of phantom limbs. I think that's it. I'm going to read from the second half of the first chapter. It starts very quickly, so we're just going to jump right in, and I'm going to do a little bit of reading for you. 5 minutes into my calc class, I glanced up and caught the new guy staring. I followed his gaze, looking down, and saw that my fingers were shimmering around the edges. I yanked my hand into my lap, and my pencil flew out of it, clattering to the floor. It landed in the aisle and rolled toward new guy's desk. He put out a foot, trapping it, and kicked it back my direction, his glance following its progress as it came back to me, bumping up against the thick sole of my boot. His eyes rose up my multi-buckled calf to my thigh, then to my lap, stopping at the spot where I was doing my best to hide my hand under my desk. I followed his gaze, looking down at the pool of blue PSS energy, shapeless and pulsing, writhing at the end of my wrist stump. I looked back up, locking eyes with him. His expression was unreadable. He didn't look surprised or afraid or alarmed. He just looked, his eyes fixed on my whacked-out hand as if curious to see what it would do next. I gritted my teeth and tried to force my PSS back into shape. I was not going to be this guy's personal freak show. I could fix this. It was just mind over matter. it didn't work. If anything, the more I tried, the worse it got, expanding and losing even more definition. The burning sensation grew so intense I squeezed my eyes shut against it. All around me I could hear the scrape and shuffle of students getting up and handing in their tests. I bent over my desk, trying to block my hand from view. For a moment, I thought about getting up and running out of class. But someone would see my hand for sure if I did that. Maybe if I took a deep breath and calmed down, it would go back to normal on its own. As if in response to this thought, the pain suddenly eased off. I opened my eyes. New guy was leaning over the edge of his desk. Oops, sorry about that. He kept jerking his head toward Passion Wainwright, the girl who sat in front of me. What did he want? An introduction? If so, his timing was utter crap. Leave me alone, I mouthed past clenched lips. He shook his head and gave an exaggerated nod toward Passion again, rolling his eyes in her direction. And this time I turned and looked. Something was crawling up Passion's back. Not just one something, 5 somethings. 5 elongated, wisp-thin tendrils winding their way up Passion's chair, climbing her back, fluttering at the strands of hair that had escaped from her ponytail, making a moving, barely perceptible pattern of bluish light on the back of her white turtleneck. It was so faint, I could almost convince myself it was an optical illusion. But it wasn't. It was my hand. My 5 fingers stretched impossibly and rising from under the front of my desk, groping the back of Passion Wainwright. I yanked my wrist in toward my body, but it made no difference. I couldn't feel my hand, couldn't control those fingers or pull them back. Passion shivered as if she felt a draft and absently brushed an undulating tendril away from her neck. The thickest finger, the one in the middle, rose up along her spine, stopping at the spot right between her shoulder blades. It held level for a moment, weaving back and forth like some ghostly snake dancing to the tune of an invisible flute. Then it dipped forward, slipped silently through the thin cotton fabric of Passion's shirt and straight into her back. She didn't make a sound as she went limp, her torso gently slanting towards her desk, the tendril of PSS embedded in her back, the only thing holding her up. I didn't make a sound either, didn't move, didn't dare. What if moving made it worse? Oh my God, a voice shimmered in my head. You think this could get worse? I could feel New Guy's eyes boring into the side of my head. Obviously, he could see my PSS skewering Passion. Why didn't he jump up and scream and point? How could he just be sitting there so calmly? I had to get away from Passion, from everyone. But if I bolted, would my PSS come with me or stretch between my wrist and Passion like some horrible, incriminating rubber band? What would that do to my hand? And what would that do to Passion? I had no idea. And before I could figure it out, the bell rang.